appreciate everybody being here. There's this new trend on ChatGPT. I don't know if anyone has heard about this over the past year, where people actually ask ChatGPT to write out their dream day. Has anybody done this? It's a fun one. So from the moment you wake up until the moment that you go to bed, what would your dream day look like? And the funny thing about this activity is that most of the dream days that you get back from ChatGPT have nothing to do with yachts or private jets. They're about time. What would it look like to wake up without an alarm, or brew your morning coffee, take your dog on a walk, eat dinner with friends? These are all things that are not fantasy, but it's life if you design it well. The hashtag ChatGPT Dream Life has over 9 million related posts on TikTok. And this shows just how many people are dreaming of a better way to live and work. And remote work, when done intentionally, can help them get there. As Liam mentioned, I'm Justin. I'm the managing director of Tulsa Remote, and he gave you a little overview. But if you aren't familiar, Tulsa Remote is a program that does pay remote workers $10,000 to move to Tulsa, Oklahoma. But more importantly, we support them with community and wellness resources and a sense of belonging once they arrive. Over the past 6 years, we've had about 3,500 people take us up on this offer. And that's 3,500 people that are looking for something more balance, more connection, more intention in how they live and work. And what we've seen is that remote work gives people the chance to create their version of that dream life that you might have done on ChatGPT if they're thoughtful about how to use it. So today, I want to share a few of those stories with you. What's worked, what hasn't, what we've learned over the last 6 years from our 3,500 remote workers, and what they might have wished they'd considered sooner. And my hope is that you'll leave with a few insights, whether you're a remote worker or a leader of remote teams, that you can make applicable to whatever context you work in and wherever it is that you call home. So one of our members, Amanda Haynes, told us about her dream day after moving to Tulsa. She woke up naturally, don't we all dream about that? Riding horses in the morning, working in a co-working space with her friends and hosting jazz night at night. And that's not her fantasy. That's her Tuesday. And she's more engaged at work because of it. So I'm going to share with you today 3 things that we've learned from our remote workers. And every quarter, we give our remote workers a survey during their year commitment in Tulsa, and then every year beyond their year commitment, we give them another survey. And so we have a lot of really fascinating data that can help set the stage for what success looks like for remote workers, what it looks like for you to lead your own work and development as a remote worker or a leader of teams. So here we go. Number 1, people are really prioritizing quality of life and meaningfully improving it. One of the most consistent patterns that we've seen is that people are not just looking for a new place to live. They're looking for a better way to live. And for Tulsa Remote members, that meant reclaiming time, building healthier routines, and making space for what matters, whether that's morning walks or creative projects or being home for dinner with their kids. And we've seen a pattern in Tulsa. When people make moves to align their work and their life, their job satisfaction improves. Not because their job changed, but because they did. And so the big insight that I want you to hear in this takeaway is that remote work gave people the opportunity to ask, what do I actually want my life to look like? And in Tulsa, people have gotten to use that freedom to reclaim time, reevaluate priorities, and ultimately reimagine success. Moira, for example, she left New York City after breastfeeding on a subway and realizing that she couldn't sustain this pace. She now owns a home and spends time with her family, has more control over what her day-to-day looks like. And that moment was a catalyst. She moved to Tulsa, bought a house, and slowed down. But the most important thing in that story is that she did not take her foot off the gas at work. she just stopped spending all of her energy surviving and actually started designing a life that actually worked for her. And that had ripple effects. She felt more present at home and more focused at work. And this is a pattern that we've seen time and time again. Members use remote work as a tool to improve not just their personal lives, but their professional clarity. And so with each of these takeaways, I'm going to try to share some data from the surveys that we see with our remote workers. And here, we see that 41% of people are reporting that they have an increased job satisfaction since moving to Tulsa. 58% are reporting an increase in their work-life balance, which matters so much to so many of us since moving to Tulsa. And 40% reported an increased job productivity since moving to Tulsa. And I got to be honest, Betsy in the back helped me put these slides together. And when she put this slide together, my first reaction was, these numbers are not very impressive. They feel a little bit low to me. Is this even something that we want to put on a slide for people? But I think what matters most here is the context. Because everybody had the same remote job when they moved to Tulsa. And so this tells us something very important. When you change where or how you live, it can fundamentally change how you show up to work. There are people moving to Tulsa that aren't starting new jobs. They're simply living in a place that supports the kind of life that they want to live and that they want to lead. And that shows up in the way that they work. So a few takeaways for leaders as it relates to this, learning from us at Tulsa Remote. First and foremost, I think we should really start to normalize life design conversations. Instead of asking how it's going at work, ask what they're asking ChatGPT. What does a good day look like for you? And figure out how you can support them in bringing work and that dream day to life in action. Of course, it's on us as leaders to also model these boundaries ourselves. We know that the way that we live and work has ripple effects to the people that we are leading. So don't glorify an always-on culture and really model those boundaries for your team. Of course, a critical aspect of remote work always is establishing a culture that evaluates outcomes and not just optics. Trust your team to get the work done, no matter where or when they are getting that work done. And then finally, invest in location-agnostic perks. What are things that you can do as a remote leader to take care of the entire employee? Mental health stipend, co-working memberships, wellness days. Really show that you support the entire employee that's showing up, not just the professional that's gaining outcomes for you as a leader. And what if you're not leading a team? What if you're not leading a fully remote organization? You're a remote worker that may be trying to thrive in your own remote work environment. I have some tips for you as well within each of these takeaways. So for you, really see remote work as your tool. But clarity is your responsibility. Ask yourself, how do you actually want your day-to-day work to look like? How do you want your life to look? You should also set boundaries and be intentional. And don't just work from home, work from a life that you love. Our second big takeaway is that we have really found that flexibility is a recruitment tool, but belonging is a retention tool. And I think this is incredibly important for anybody leading remote teams or trying to get remote workers to a city, or really just trying to think about connection within your own environment. Remote work can obviously offer freedom, which is what we love and such a big reason why we're all here this week. But it also comes with the risk of isolation. And what we've learned at Tulsa Remote is that people who thrive in this new way of working are the ones who are actively invested in becoming something bigger, being a part of something bigger. And so for Tulsa Remote members, that is choosing a place with a built-in community building mechanism that helps to unlock everything from deeper friendships to career opportunities that they might not have found on their own. But it's not just about where you live. It's about who you're living alongside. One thing that is very interesting that we've seen in our surveys is that remote workers who report in their surveys that they have connected at a local level, built those friendships, shown up to events, feeling integrated in the community, are also reporting a 2 times higher satisfaction at work than the people who are not feeling connected. This is about connection, regardless of your context. These folks are investing in connection, which is paying off in the workplace. So how do we at Tulsa Remote make that connection happen? We have a member integration specialist who meets with every member that comes into town and meets with them in their first 90 days and then again at 6 months. They are tracking that engagement about what makes somebody passionate or what are the values that somebody has and how do we pair them up with an organization or person in the city that can bring some of those values and passions to life. We have events on a consistent basis and leverage Slack to also help people find others that have their same passions and interests. So what might that look like for you at a company? Perhaps you have an onboarding specialist that meets with somebody in their first 90 days and again at 6 months and again at a year and talks nothing about how they're doing at their job, but more about how they're feeling connected to their place, regardless of where that place is. The insight here is that we want to help people feel like they are connected to something bigger. Remote work can lead to isolation, but in the right environment, it can also lead to deeper connection. And we've seen that members who engage in their community are far more likely to stay, thrive, and contribute to the companies that they're working with. Corinne, one of our members, found her job on Slack, but she stayed in Tulsa because of the connectivity that she made at her slam poetry events, in theater, and ultimately in her creative community. And Trey, on the screen behind me, said that it might have been the $10,000 that got his attention or piqued his interest, but ultimately it was the community that kept him in Tulsa and continues to keep him around today. So what does the data say about this takeaway when we survey our members? First of all, 71% of folks are forming close relationships in Tulsa. 75% or 76% of people are reporting a sense of belonging. 85% of people are saying that the events that we're doing are helping them create new relationships and new people, and the people that show high satisfaction in those three areas are also the most satisfied at work. And we really have nothing to do with what they're doing in the workplace, but the connectivity that we're providing to people is allowing them to show up as better employees and better human beings in general. So what does this mean for you? As a leader, if you're leading remote teams, first and foremost, you should recognize that culture does not happen by accident. You have to be deliberate about building belonging through rituals, shared identity, and create space for connection, both inside and outside of your teams. You could assign a connection coach, like I mentioned earlier, someone who's checking in with people and making sure that they're feeling part of something bigger, even if that is outside of the workplace. Help people find their people. You know, create those interest-based Slack channels that I'm sure so many of you are doing, virtual clubs or location-based meetups, if your distributed workforce does have a high population in specific geographies. And don't just ask, how is work going? Ask questions like, who have you connected with? Where are you finding the connection in the place that you live? And how can I support you in finding that connection if you aren't finding it yourself? So what about you as the remote worker that maybe doesn't exactly feel supported in those ways? Many of the things are going to be similar, but I encourage you to know that freedom does not mean flying solo. The freedom that remote work brings does not mean isolation. And you should invest in connection yourself. Go above and beyond, regardless of where you're working, to find that connection and fill up your cup outside of work. Remote work certainly gives you space, but it's up to you to fill that space with meaning. Seek out community, seek out connection, both online and in real life. The relationships that you build outside of your job could be the reason that you love your job. And I wouldn't underestimate the power that that can have for you. All right, and finally, our third takeaway here is that if you nurture the environment, you should certainly expect and watch talent expand around you. And this is one of the most surprising things that we've seen in Tulsa, and maybe something that we didn't expect when we started this venture, which, to be honest, many of the things that we've seen come to life, we didn't expect. But this is one beautiful thing that I think is really connected to a lot of what you all are doing. When people land in the right environment, they start to do more than what's expected. I'm going to say that one more time. When people land in the right environment, they start to do more than what's expected. They don't just contribute, they start creating. And what we've seen at Tulsa Remote is that members have been launching companies, starting nonprofits, picking up that side gig or creative project, not because that was our plan when we brought them to town, but because the environment that we've created gave them the energy, the clarity, and the confidence to dream bigger. But here's the thing. Tulsa didn't just become that type of place by accident. Long before Tulsa Remote existed, the city was investing in its future. We created things like the gathering place to create shared experiences. We revitalized downtown. We seeded a growing tech and innovation hub. And we bet on the idea that if we created a great place to live, great people would show up and do great things. Tulsa did not become a place that people moved because it was affordable. It became a place that people stayed because they felt inspired. And when people feel inspired, they act bigger. Jonathan told us that he never would have launched his company if it weren't for Tulsa Remote. It was just the lower cost of living that maybe got his attention, but the conversations and the connection and the support and the visibility is ultimately what helped him take that next step. And Lawrence, another member, opened up a bakery downtown, which was a side gig when he moved to Tulsa. He just loved making sourdough bread. And now that's his full-time job. Giving bread to folks downtown, selling that at a really cool spot right around the corner from our co-working spot. And they weren't recruited to be founders, right? But the environment gave them permission to become something bigger. And that's the opportunity for every company in this room. If you build an environment that people want to be in and be bold about the mission and vision that you might have at your company, that is what attracts the right people. Then you create the systems and empower those folks to share ideas and be innovative. And that's your responsibility to also create the environment that allows them to be their best. We also want to see curated inspiration, share stories of innovation and personal growth across your team. It reminds people of what is possible, and it helps them to see that innovation is cheered for. It is really a part of your culture and something that you want to see on a daily basis. We want to invest in visibility. Give your team a platform to pitch ideas or lead initiatives or explore new paths, especially those that aren't tied to a specific job title. And then incentivize the great ideas that might come out of that space. And then finally, encourage place-based creativity. If you or your team are working from spots that energize each other, incentivize that too. They can help change the workforce and the workplace that you all are living in. And for remote workers, sometimes the biggest career move is not a new job. It's finding or creating an environment that brings your ideas to life in the job that you're in. So feel free to take ownership of that. Ask yourself, are you in a place that energizes you? Do you have the people around you who challenge you and support you? Are you building a life that gives you room to grow? Remote work gives you freedom, but it's up to you to put yourself in a place that pulls your best ideas forward. So in closing, it really all comes down to being intentional. Everyone in this room knows that remote work brings flexibility, but not everybody is using that well. And at Tulsa Remote, what we've learned is that the people who have seen the biggest transformation weren't just lucky. They were intentional. They got off the couch, they built community, and they improved their lives because of the conscious choices that they made, where they wanted to live, how they wanted to spend their time, who they wanted to build community with, what kind of life they actually wanted to lead. And at Tulsa Remote, our 3,500 members have shown what's possible when people align life and work with intention. Last calendar year alone, we had $622 million in economic impact. As I mentioned earlier, we've seen a 2 times higher satisfaction rate for folks that are feeling connected and plugged in. And people are sticking around in this culture, in this environment that we have nurtured. About 76% of folks who have come through the program since 2019 are still around in Tulsa today. And these are not just stats. They're proof that remote work, when done right and when done with intention, are successful not only for the individual or the city or the company, but when used with clarity, they can unlock more meaning, more stability, and more success. Not in spite of being remote, but because of it. So the questions that I'll leave you with. Remote work gives all of us freedom. But what are we doing with it? What are you doing with it for yourself, for your team, for the people that you're leading or hiring and supporting? Chances are that you've already lived out pieces of your dream day without even realizing it. But what would happen if you actually created that with intention every day, not only for yourself, but for the people that you're surrounding yourself with? So, in closing, I would love to invite you to learn more about Tulsa Remote. We have some awesome information at this QR code. We also have a booth right behind this wall. I would love to stick around and hear if there are any opportunities for collaboration or ways in which this might have sparked ideas for you, yourself, or at your company. But I appreciate you all listening, and hopefully you are taking something away from this that will be applicable to yourself or your company. Thank you.